He told everyone the baby wasn't his and married someone more suitable. The new wife couldn't give him a child, and he's begging the daughter he denied for a second chance. Please, Tasha. At least let me explain. Explain what exactly, Declan? Why you told everyone my baby wasn't yours? Or why you're suddenly interested in Kayla after 16 years of silence? I know I don't deserve your time. But my father is dying. Your father. The man whose grandchild you publicly denied. That man? I was wrong. We were all wrong. Please. 16 years, Declan. 16 years where you couldn't be bothered to even ask if your child was okay. I'll do whatever it takes. Anything. Just let me meet her. That's always been your problem. You think everything has a price. But a relationship with your daughter? That can't be bought. The words hung in the air of the modest cafe, sharp as glass between them. Tasha Collins stared across the table at the man who had once promised her everything, then taken everything away. The man who had walked out when she needed him most, who had publicly humiliated her by questioning her integrity, who had married another woman while she was still carrying his child. Declan Whitaker shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. The confident, ambitious young architect who had broken her heart 16 years ago was still visible in his features, but time had etched lines around his eyes. Success had given him the polished exterior of wealth, the tailored shirt, the expensive watch, the carefully maintained haircut, but something haunted lingered behind his eyes. I have a class to teach in 20 minutes, Tasha said, glancing at her watch. So whatever this is about, make it quick. My father has pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors are giving him 3 to 6 months. Declan spoke the words quietly, his fingers tightening around his untouched coffee cup. He's asking to meet all his grandchildren before he dies. Including Kayla. Tasha's expression didn't soften. The grandfather who never acknowledged her existence. Who stood by silently while you denied your own child? That grandfather? He was wrong. We were all wrong, Declan admitted, meeting her eyes directly for the first time. But he's dying now, and he wants to make amends. As do I. How convenient that your conscience finally appears when you need something. Tasha's voice was cool, controlled. 16 years of nothing, and suddenly you remember you have a daughter. Outside the cafe window, rain began to fall, streaking the glass and blurring the world beyond. 16 years of carefully constructed walls trembled between them. 16 years of Tasha raising their daughter alone while Declan built his empire with the woman he deemed more suitable. 16 years that couldn't be erased by one conversation on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Declan Whitaker stared at the imposing brick colonial home where he had lived for the past 15 years, a property featured twice in Architectural Digest. The gardener was trimming the immaculate hedges while the housekeeper's car sat in the circular driveway. Everything in its proper place, just as he had always insisted. Everything except what mattered most. The thick manila envelope on the passenger seat contained the medical reports he had read and reread since yesterday's appointment. His wife Rebecca's latest fertility specialist had been gentle but direct. Mrs. Whitaker, we've exhausted all available treatments. Given your age and medical history, I believe it's time to consider other paths to parenthood. Rebecca had sat perfectly straight in her chair, her designer suit unwrinkled, her expression composed despite the devastation Declan knew she felt inside. Adoption, she had asked, her voice steady. That's certainly an option, the doctor had replied. Or surrogacy, if using your own genetic material remains important to you. On the drive home, Rebecca had finally broken her silence. 15 years, she had whispered. 15 years of trying, Declan. Tests, treatments, procedures, disappointments. I'm 46 now. I think I'm done trying. Declan had reached for her hand, feeling the cold metal of her wedding ring. We'll figure this out. We always do. But that night, as Rebecca slept beside him, aided by the sleeping pills that had become part of her nightly routine, Declan had lain awake, confronting the truth he had buried for 16 years. There was a child, his child, somewhere in the world. A daughter he had denied, whose existence he had tried to erase. Kayla Collins. Even her name was a reproach. She bore her mother's surname, not his. Because he had made sure of that. The text from his younger sister that morning had been the final push he needed. Dad's tests came back. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctor says 3 to 6 months. He wants to see all his grandchildren. All of them, Declan. He mentioned her specifically. How his father had known about Kayla, Declan couldn't guess. Walter Whitaker had always had ways of knowing things his children thought were secret. But the message was clear. His father, facing his own mortality, wanted to right the wrongs of the past before it was too late. As Declan finally entered his house, the silence was oppressive. Rebecca was at her investment firm, likely burying herself in work as she processed yesterday's definitive news. They had stopped talking about children months ago, the subject too painful, the failure too complete. Their home, all 6,000 square feet of it, had bedrooms that would never hold children. A backyard with space for a swing set that would never be built. A future of just the two of them in the shrine to success that suddenly felt hollow. Declan climbed the stairs to his home office and sat at his desk, opening his laptop with a sense of purpose. It took him less than 5 minutes to find her. Tasha Collins had a professional website showcasing her work as an artist and art teacher. And there, in a photo of a gallery opening, stood a young woman with his eyes and Tasha's smile. Kayla Collins, 16 years old, standing proudly next to a painting that had won a local competition. The resemblance hit Declan with physical force. How had he ever convinced himself this child wasn't his? How had he allowed pride and ambition to blind him so completely? With shaking hands, he picked up his phone and did what he should have done 16 years ago. He faced the truth. Have you ever looked back on a choice you made and realized the true cost of your decision? That moment when you finally see how one wrong turn altered not just your life, but the lives of others? If so, leave a comment below sharing your experience. Sometimes acknowledging our mistakes is the first step toward healing. The campus coffee shop where Declan and Tasha first met was long gone, replaced by a sleek student center that bore no trace of the cozy corner where a 21-year-old architecture student had spilled coffee on a beautiful art major's sketchbook. "I'm so sorry," Declan had stammered, grabbing napkins to blot the spreading stain. "I wasn't looking where I was going." Clearly, Tasha had replied, but her annoyed expression had softened as she looked up at him. "Though I suppose you've given my mediocre landscape an interesting new dimension." That had been the beginning, a chance encounter that bloomed into romance despite their differences. Declan, the scholarship student from a middle-class family, determined to climb the social ladder through his talent and ambition. Tasha, the free-spirited artist who valued authenticity over achievement, who saw beauty in imperfection. Their differences had seemed complementary at first. Declan admired Tasha's creativity and passion. Tasha was drawn to Declan's focus and drive. For 3 years, they built a life together, Declan advancing through his program with honors, Tasha establishing herself in the local art scene, both planning a future that would somehow accommodate both their dreams. "We can make it work," Declan would say when doubts crept in. "Your art studio in the house I'll design for us. Weekend trips to galleries in New York. A life with both security and creativity." Tasha would smile, wanting to believe him, even as she sensed the growing gulf between their values. Declan's increasing preoccupation with prestige, with connections, with the right people in the right places. The subtle but persistent pressure to be more practical, more polished, more aligned with the future he envisioned. Then came graduation, and Declan's entry-level position at Harrington and Phillips, the most prestigious architectural firm in the city. The long hours, the careful cultivation of clients, the growing absence from their shared apartment. Tasha's art teaching job supported them while Declan worked his way up, a temporary arrangement that began to feel increasingly permanent. "It's an investment in our future," Declan would explain when he missed another of her gallery openings. "Once I make junior partner, we'll have the life we planned." The day Tasha discovered she was pregnant, she'd planned a special dinner, imagining Declan's face lighting up with joy. Instead, she found herself telling him over cold takeout at 10 p.m. when he finally returned from a client meeting. Pregnant? Declan had set down his fork, his expression not joyful but alarmed. Are you sure? 3 tests sure, Tasha had replied, her own excitement dimming at his response. I know it's sooner than we planned, but... Sooner? We're barely making ends meet. I'm years away from junior partner. The apartment is too small. We don't have savings. This is a disaster. A disaster? Tasha had repeated, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. This is our child, Declan. The argument that followed was the first of many, as Declan's initial shock hardened into resistance. The timing was wrong. His career would suffer. They weren't ready. Each objection driving a deeper wedge between them. Then came the Harrington Foundation Gala, a prestigious event where junior architects could mingle with potential clients. Declan had insisted Tasha attend, despite her morning sickness and growing discomfort with his colleagues' pretensions. Just for an hour, he'd promised. It's important for my career. At the gala, Tasha had watched from a corner as Declan charmed the room, moving easily among people who discussed vacation homes and private schools with casual entitlement. She'd felt increasingly out of place in her simple black dress, nursing a glass of water while others sipped champagne. That was the night she first saw him with Rebecca Harrington, the elegant daughter of the firm's founding partner. The way they laughed together, the subtle touch of Rebecca's hand on Declan's arm, the obvious approval in her father's eyes as he watched them. When confronted later, Declan had dismissed Tasha's concerns. She's a client's daughter. Networking is part of the job. But something had changed. In the weeks that followed, Declan worked later, came home less. When he did return, he was distant, critical, picking fights over small things. Until the morning he finally said it. How can you even be sure it's mine? Tasha had stared at him in disbelief, one hand resting on her 4 months pregnant belly. What did you just say to me? We were having problems. You were unhappy with my hours. Maybe you sought comfort elsewhere. You know that's not true, Tasha had whispered, tears filling her eyes. How can you even suggest that? But she knew why. She had seen the society page photo of Declan at another event, Rebecca Harrington at his side. She had heard the rumors from mutual friends. Declan had found a more suitable path to success, and he needed a reason to take it. The public humiliation had come next. Declan telling colleagues, friends, even Tasha's parents that he had doubts about the paternity. The pointed questions about whether she would pursue testing, knowing she couldn't force him to participate if he refused. The gradual withdrawal of mutual friends who found the situation too uncomfortable to navigate. Then the final blow, the engagement announcement in the local paper. Declan Whitaker and Rebecca Harrington, to be married in an exclusive ceremony at the Harrington estate. The wedding scheduled for June, just 2 months before Tasha's due date. Tasha had closed the newspaper, placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, and made a promise to the child within. You will never have to beg for love. You will never be someone's inconvenience. You will always be enough exactly as you are. 2 weeks later, she left the city, moving to a smaller community where teaching positions were available and housing affordable, where she could raise her child away from whispers and judgment. Where she could build a life centered on love rather than ambition, authenticity rather than appearance. A life without Declan Whitaker. I'm not doing it for you, Tasha clarified, her gaze direct and unwavering as she sat across from Declan 16 years later. I'm doing it because your sister Caroline called and explained about your father. She always was the decent one in your family. The barb struck home, but Declan didn't flinch. Yes, she is. She's also the one who told me about Kayla's art award. Congratulations, she's clearly talented. Like you would know, Tasha replied coldly. But yes, she is. Exceptionally so. Declan took a deep breath. Tasha, I know there's nothing I can say to justify what I did. But my father is dying. He's asking to meet all his grandchildren before he goes. Including Kayla. The grandfather who never acknowledged her existence. Who stood silently by while you denied your own child. He was wrong. We were all wrong, Declan admitted. But he's dying now, and he wants to make amends. As do I. Tasha studied him, her artist's eye taking in the changes 16 years had wrought. The successful architect who had once been her college sweetheart now had silver threading through his dark hair, lines etched around his eyes. He looked prosperous but tired. Accomplished but somehow diminished. So this is about easing your father's conscience before he dies? And yours too, I suppose? Partly, Declan acknowledged, determined to be honest. But it's also about Kayla. About her right to know her family, if she wants to. If she wants to, Tasha repeated, emphasizing each word. That's the key phrase here, Declan. This will be Kayla's decision, not yours, not your father's, and not even mine. She's 16 now, old enough to decide for herself if she wants to meet the father who publicly humiliated her mother and denied her existence. Declan winced at the brutal accuracy of her description. I understand. All I'm asking is that you tell her I'd like to meet her. That her grandfather is asking to meet her before he dies. After that, whatever she decides, I'll respect it. Tasha was silent for a long moment, turning her coffee cup slowly between her fingers. Does your wife know you're here? The question caught Declan off guard. No. Not yet. But I'll tell her tonight. Ah yes, the beautiful and accomplished Rebecca, Tasha nodded. The woman you left me for because she was more suitable for your career aspirations. How is married life with someone so perfectly matched to your social ambitions? There was no spite in her tone, only a genuine curiosity that made the question even more difficult to answer. We've had our struggles, Declan said finally. We've been trying to have children since we married. Without success. Something flickered in Tasha's eyes, not satisfaction at his pain, as he might have expected, but a deeper understanding. I'm sorry to hear that, she said, and Declan could tell she meant it. Truly. Her compassion, so undeserved, threatened to undo him completely. Thank you, he managed. 15 minutes are up, Tasha said, glancing at her watch. I need to go teach my class. Will you talk to Kayla? Declan asked, unable to keep the plea from his voice. Tasha stood, gathering her bag. Yes. But I'll tell her everything, Declan. The full truth. How you questioned my fidelity when I told you I was pregnant. How you told everyone who would listen that the baby couldn't be yours. How you left for Rebecca within months and married her before Kayla was even born. She deserves to know exactly who's asking to meet her. Declan nodded, accepting the terms. I understand. I'll call you when she's made her decision, Tasha said, turning to leave. Tasha, Declan called, stopping her. Thank you. For raising her. For being the parent I failed to be. She looked back at him, her expression softening slightly. I didn't do it for you, Declan. I did it for her. She's an amazing young woman. If she decides to meet you, you'll see that for yourself. With that, she was gone, leaving Declan alone with the weight of 16 years of absence pressing down on him. The journey of a single mother is often paved with challenges that many never see. For Tasha Collins, the road began in a small apartment 40 miles from the city where her dreams had unraveled, with just enough space for herself and the baby growing within her. The first months after leaving were the hardest. Pregnant and alone, starting over in a community where she knew no one, teaching art at the local high school while fielding concerned looks from colleagues who noticed her condition and absence of a wedding ring. My daughter's father isn't in the picture, she would explain simply, learning early to set boundaries around her privacy. But we're going to be just fine. And somehow, through determination and the unexpected kindnesses of strangers turned friends, they were. Tasha found a community that valued her teaching and her art. She found an elderly neighbor who became an adoptive grandmother, offering childcare and wisdom in equal measure. She found strength within herself that she hadn't known existed. When Kayla was born on a stormy August night, exactly 2 months after Declan's wedding to Rebecca, as Tasha couldn't help but note, the difficult labor was eased by the fierce joy that overwhelmed her when she first held her daughter. "Hello, my Kayla," she had whispered to the tiny, perfect face looking up at her. "It's just you and me, but that's all we need. I promise." She had considered giving Kayla the middle name Whitaker, a small acknowledgement of her paternity. But in the end, she chose Margaret, after her own grandmother who had taught her that art wasn't frivolous but essential to understanding the world. Declan had relinquished any claim to this child. His name would not be part of her identity. The early years were a blur of exhaustion and joy. Midnight feedings after days of teaching. Stretching a teacher's salary to cover childcare, rent, and student loans. Painting only in the precious hours after Kayla went to sleep, maintaining her artistic practice even when exhibitions and sales were rare. But there were treasures amid the struggle. Kayla's first smile, first steps, first words. The way her daughter's eyes, so startlingly like Declan's, would light up when Tasha entered a room. The small hand that trustingly held hers, the fierce hugs that communicated more than words ever could. As Kayla grew, so did Tasha's career. A local gallery exhibition led to regional recognition. Teaching positions expanded to include adult classes and workshops. Slowly, steadily, she built a life that encompassed both motherhood and artistry, proving wrong those who had suggested she would have to sacrifice one for the other. When Kayla turned 4, the inevitable questions began. "Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like Emma does?" They had been at the park, watching another child play with her father. Tasha had knelt down, meeting her daughter's curious gaze directly. "Families come in all different shapes, sweetheart. Some have a mommy and daddy. Some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. Some, like us, have just a mommy. But where is my daddy? Did he die?" "No, he didn't die," Tasha had answered carefully. "He lives far away. He wasn't ready to be a father when you were born. Will he ever be ready?" The innocent question had pierced Tasha's heart. "I don't know, Kayla. But what I do know is that you are loved so much. By me, by Grandma Gloria next door, by your teachers. Some people have one special person who loves them. You have many." As the years passed, Tasha had answered Kayla's questions with age-appropriate honesty. She never vilified Declan, understanding that to poison her daughter against her father would only harm Kayla in the end. But neither did she romanticize his absence. "Your father made choices based on what he thought would make him happy," she explained when Kayla was 12 and asking more pointed questions. "Unfortunately, those choices didn't include being part of our family. Was it because of me? Was there something wrong with me?" "No," Tasha had been fierce in her response. "Nothing about you was wrong. Nothing. The problems were his fear, ambition, immaturity. Never, ever think his absence reflects on your worth." Through it all, Tasha had protected Kayla without sheltering her, prepared her for a world that wasn't always kind without making her cynical. And Kayla had thrived, a thoughtful, talented girl with her mother's creativity and a quiet determination that Tasha recognized from a younger Declan, before ambition had corrupted his better qualities. When Kayla won her first major art prize at 16, Tasha had watched her daughter accept the award with poise and humility, thanking her teachers and mentors by name. Pride had swelled within her, not just for the accomplishment, but for the person Kayla had become, compassionate, authentic, resilient. That evening, as they celebrated over dinner at their favorite restaurant, Kayla had asked a question Tasha hadn't expected. "Mom, do you ever regret not having more children? Not finding someone else after my father?" Tasha had considered the question thoughtfully. "There were times I was lonely, yes. Times I wondered about different paths. But regret? No. You have been the greatest joy of my life, Kayla. And while another relationship might have been nice, it was never a void I needed to fill at any cost. Like Declan and his wife trying so desperately for a baby?" Kayla asked after Tasha had explained her conversation with Declan. They sat at their kitchen table, the remains of dinner pushed aside, a folder containing everything Tasha had saved about Declan over the years opened between them, news clippings of his architectural achievements, the occasional society page mention, the wedding announcement that had once caused such pain. Perhaps, Tasha acknowledged. Though I can't presume to understand their motivations. Kayla studied a recent photograph of Declan accepting an award for a museum design. He looks sad, she observed. Even though he's smiling. Tasha looked at the image more carefully, seeing what her perceptive daughter had noticed. The smile that didn't reach his eyes, the tension in his posture despite the achievement being celebrated. Success doesn't guarantee happiness, she said gently. Something I tried to teach you. You did. Kayla reached across the table to squeeze her mother's hand. And I was listening. Kayla was quiet for a moment, processing everything she had learned. Do you think I should meet him? That's entirely your decision, Tasha answered carefully. I won't tell you what to do, though I'll support whatever you choose. But remember, you don't owe him anything. Not your time, not your forgiveness, not your relationship. If you decide to meet him, do it for yourself, not for him or his dying father. I think I want to, Kayla said slowly. Not because I need a father figure, I've done fine without one. But because I'm curious. About where I come from. About why he made the choices he did. About what kind of person does what he did. Tasha nodded, unsurprised by her daughter's thoughtfulness. That's a valid reason. Just promise me you'll protect your heart. Don't expect too much from this meeting. I won't, Kayla assured her. I've had 16 years of reality. I'm not suddenly expecting a fairy tale ending. Tasha smiled sadly. You're wiser at 16 than many people are at 40. Including your father, apparently. Will you be there? When I meet him? If you want me to be, absolutely. I do, Kayla confirmed. After all, you're the parent who stayed. You should have a front row seat to his reckoning. Despite the bravado, Tasha could see the vulnerability beneath her daughter's confident exterior. Whatever happened next, she would be there to ensure Kayla emerged whole, regardless of Declan Whitaker's belated interest in being a father. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after someone let you down? Share your story of resilience in the comments. Sometimes the family we create is stronger than the one we were born into. That evening, Declan sat across from Rebecca at their formal dining table, the distance between them greater than the polished mahogany that separated them. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier overhead, refracting it into tiny rainbows that danced across the imported linen tablecloth. The perfect setting for the imperfect conversation that couldn't be postponed any longer. Your father has cancer? Rebecca repeated, processing the first of his revelations. Oh, Declan. I'm so sorry. How is Caroline taking it? As well as can be expected, Declan replied, steeling himself for what came next. But there's something else I need to tell you. Something I should have told you years ago. Rebecca set down her fork, her expression wary. At 46, she was still beautiful, her blonde hair expertly highlighted to disguise the first traces of gray, her slim figure maintained through rigorous discipline. 15 years of marriage had taught her to recognize when Declan was about to say something significant. What is it? She asked, her voice controlled. Before you and I met, I was involved with someone. A woman named Tasha Collins. I know that, Rebecca said carefully. You mentioned a serious relationship in college that ended before we met. It didn't exactly end before we met, Declan admitted, the truth finally emerging after all these years. Tasha was pregnant when I left her. She claimed the baby was mine. I denied it. Publicly. Rebecca's face drained of color. You have a child? A child you abandoned? A daughter, Declan confirmed, shame burning through him. Her name is Kayla. She's 16 now. 16 years, Rebecca whispered. All this time, while we've been trying to have a child of our own, you already had a daughter? Her voice rose with each word, disbelief giving way to anger. I convinced myself it wasn't true, Declan tried to explain. Tasha and I were having problems. I had just met you. I was focused on making partner at the firm. It was easier to believe she was lying than to accept the responsibility. So you just walked away? From your own child? Yes, Declan admitted, the single syllable carrying the weight of his greatest failure. Rebecca stood abruptly, pushing back from the table. I need some air. Declan watched helplessly as she walked out onto the terrace, her slim figure silhouetted against the evening sky. After a moment, he followed. My father wants to meet her, he said quietly, joining Rebecca at the stone balustrade. Before he dies. Rebecca didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the carefully landscaped garden below. And you? What do you want, Declan? It was the question he'd been asking himself since seeing Kayla's photograph. I want to know her, he said finally. I've missed 16 years of her life. I can't get those back. But maybe there's still time to be some kind of father to her. If she'll have you, Rebecca pointed out, her voice cool. If she'll have me, Declan agreed. Tasha's talking to her. It will be Kayla's decision whether to meet me or not. Rebecca was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, does she look like you? The question surprised him. Yes, he said softly. She has my eyes. And something in her smile. All these years, Rebecca murmured, shaking her head. All the treatments, the disappointments, the grief each time it didn't work. And you already had a child in the world. I'm sorry, Declan said, the words wholly inadequate. I should have told you from the beginning. I should have faced the truth myself. Rebecca turned to him finally, her expression more sad than angry. Yes, you should have. What happens now? I don't know, Declan admitted. I'm waiting to hear if Kayla wants to meet me. After that, I guess we'll see. We, Rebecca repeated. Is there still a we in this scenario, Declan? He looked at his wife, the woman he had chosen for her pedigree, her social connections, her suitability to the life he'd wanted to build. They had built that life together, achieved everything they'd planned. Everything except the family they had come to desperately want. I hope so, he said quietly. But I understand if this changes things for you. Rebecca sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 46 years. I need time to process this. And to decide what it means for us. She straightened her shoulders, composure returning. For now, focus on your father. And on Kayla, if she agrees to meet you. We can figure out the rest later. With that, she walked past him back into the house, leaving Declan alone with the realization that his carefully constructed life was finally facing the consequences of its faulty foundation. The perfect marriage that Declan and Rebecca had presented to the world had never been quite as idyllic behind closed doors. From the beginning, theirs had been a partnership of complementary ambitions rather than passionate love, a union that made sense on paper and in practice, if not always in their hearts. Their courtship had been swift and strategic. Rebecca, attracted to Declan's talent and drive, had seen in him a partner who could build an impressive life with her. Declan, dazzled by Rebecca's social connections and elegance, had seen the doors she could open for his career. Together, they made a formidable team, she with her family name and investment acumen, he with his architectural vision and ambition. The wedding at the Harrington estate had been the social event of the season. 600 guests, coverage in society pages, the perfect launch for their life together. If Declan had experienced any doubts, any thoughts of the pregnant woman he had left behind, he had buried them beneath champagne and congratulations. The first year had been consumed with establishing their place, renovating the colonial mansion Rebecca's parents had given them as a wedding gift, entertaining the right people, positioning Declan for promotion within the firm that now included his father-in-law's name. Children were a someday plan, not an immediate priority. When they finally decided to start a family after 3 years of marriage, both had approached it with the same efficiency they applied to all aspects of life. They assumed success would come as easily as it had in their careers. It didn't. The first miscarriage came as a shock, an unfamiliar failure in lives accustomed to achievement. Rebecca had been 10 weeks along, just starting to imagine the nursery she would create, when the cramping began. These things happen, the doctor had assured them. There's no reason to believe you won't conceive again and carry to term. They had tried again, approaching conception with even more determination. Charts, schedules, optimal timing. 6 months later, Rebecca was pregnant again. This time, they told no one, cautiously waiting until the second trimester to share the news. The second miscarriage, at 14 weeks, had been devastating. Rebecca had already heard the heartbeat, had seen the tiny form on ultrasound. The loss triggered a depression she struggled to hide from their social circle. I feel like a failure, she had confessed to Declan late one night. The one thing my body should be able to do naturally, and I can't. It's not your fault, Declan had assured her, holding her as she cried. We'll keep trying. Or we'll find another way. The next 4 years had been a cycle of hope and disappointment. Fertility specialists, hormone treatments, lifestyle changes. A third pregnancy that ended at 8 weeks. The increasingly clinical approach to intimacy as spontaneity gave way to scheduled attempts at conception. Through it all, their public facade remained flawless. Power couple at charity galas. Hosts of elegant dinner parties. Successful professionals building their empire. Only those closest to them knew of the fertility treatments, the disappointments, the growing strain on their marriage. By their 10th anniversary, they had exhausted the standard treatments and moved on to more intensive interventions. IVF cycles that drained their emotions and finances, despite their considerable resources. Each failure driving them further apart even as they presented a united front to the world. Maybe we're not meant to have children, Rebecca had suggested after the third failed IVF attempt. Maybe we should accept that and focus on other aspects of our life together. If that's what you want, Declan had replied, uncertain whether he felt relief or disappointment. But the desire for a child had become more than a wish for Rebecca, it had become a void that threatened to consume her. She threw herself into researching more experimental treatments, traveling to specialists across the country and even internationally. Declan had supported her efforts, accompanying her to appointments when his work allowed, writing checks without question. What he couldn't provide was emotional comfort. Something in him had walled off that part of himself years ago, perhaps when he had walked away from Tasha and their unborn child, perhaps even earlier. He could offer solutions, resources, practical support, but not the deeper connection Rebecca increasingly needed. By their 15th anniversary, they lived largely parallel lives in their beautiful home. Rebecca focused on her investment work in fertility treatments, Declan immersed in his architectural firm that now bore his name alongside his father-in-law's. They still attended events together, still presented the image of success, still shared a bed, though rarely for anything but sleep. The final specialist's verdict had been like a door closing on a room they had spent 15 years trying to enter. No more treatments. No more options beyond surrogacy or adoption. The end of a journey that had defined their marriage for so long. Now, with Declan's revelation about Kayla, Rebecca found herself facing not just the end of her dream of motherhood, but the knowledge that her husband had fathered a child he had abandoned, a child who existed in the world while she had endured years of painful treatments and devastating losses. The betrayal was not infidelity, the child had been conceived before they met, but dishonesty. 15 years of marriage, and Declan had never once mentioned that he had potentially fathered a child. Had never acknowledged the possibility that somewhere in the world, a piece of him lived and grew while Rebecca's body repeatedly rejected the children they tried to create together. As Rebecca prepared for bed that night, methodically applying her expensive night creams, she studied her reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at her was composed, controlled, the same expression she had perfected for boardrooms and charity galas. But her eyes held questions she had been avoiding for years. Had she chosen wrongly, all those years ago? Had she mistaken ambition for character, potential for substance? Had the life they built together been worth the compromises she had made? And now, with this revelation, what did she want for her future? At 46, Rebecca faced possibilities she had never seriously considered. Divorce. Starting over. A life structured around her own needs and desires rather than the partnership she and Declan had crafted. Or forgiveness? Adaptation. Finding a way forward that acknowledged this new reality. There were no easy answers. Only the recognition that the perfect life she had pursued so determinedly had always been an illusion, one that was finally, irrevocably shattered. What defines true success in life? Is it career achievements, social status, and material wealth? Or is it something more fundamental, integrity, authentic relationships, living in accordance with your values? Share your thoughts in the comments below. 3 days passed without word from Tasha. 3 days in which Declan barely slept, his mind replaying every moment of his last conversation with her, imagining Kayla's reaction to learning about the father who had denied her. On the 4th day, as Declan sat in his office reviewing plans for a new museum project, his phone rang. Tasha's name appeared on the screen. "Hello," he answered, his heart pounding. "It's Tasha," came the calm reply. "Kayla has made her decision." Declan held his breath, preparing himself for rejection. "She's willing to meet you," Tasha continued. "But she has conditions." Relief flooded through him. "Anything. Whatever she wants. First, I'll be present for the initial meeting. Second, she wants to meet in a neutral location, not at your home. And third, she wants to meet your father separately, with me there as well." Of course, Declan agreed immediately. "When?" "Saturday. There's a cafe near the art center where Kayla takes weekend classes. 1 o'clock. "I'll be there," Declan promised. "Thank you, Tasha. And please, thank Kayla for giving me this chance." "Don't thank me yet," Tasha cautioned. "She's agreed to one meeting, Declan. That's all. What happens after that depends entirely on how it goes." After hanging up, Declan sat motionless at his desk, overwhelmed by the opportunity he had been given, an opportunity he in no way deserved. That night, he told Rebecca about the planned meeting. "Would you like to come with me?" he asked tentatively. Rebecca shook her head. "No. This first meeting should be just you. It's been 16 years, Declan. Give Kayla the chance to meet her father without complicating things further." She hesitated, then added, "But I would like to meet her someday, if she's open to that." Declan nodded, grateful for Rebecca's understanding, even as he sensed a growing distance between them, a chasm that had always existed but that he was only now beginning to acknowledge. Saturday arrived with painful slowness. Declan chose his clothes carefully, avoiding both the formal suits he wore to work and the casual luxury brands that defined his weekend wardrobe. In the end, he settled on a simple button-down shirt and khakis, clothes that wouldn't emphasize the vast economic distance between his life and Kayla's. The cafe Tasha had chosen was in the Arts District, a bright space with local artwork on the walls and mismatched furniture that somehow formed a cohesive whole. Declan arrived 20 minutes early, too anxious to wait at home any longer. He chose a table by the window where they would see him when they arrived. As he waited, Declan rehearsed what he might say, how he might explain 16 years of absence. But every opening he imagined sounded hollow, inadequate. How did one apologize for missing a child's entire life? For denying her very existence? At precisely 1 o'clock, the door opened. Tasha entered first, scanning the cafe until she spotted him. Behind her came a young woman whose appearance stole Declan's breath. Kayla was tall for her age, with his dark hair and eyes, but Tasha's delicate features and artistic hands. She carried herself with a quiet confidence, her gaze direct and assessing as it rested on him. She wore jeans and a paint-splattered denim jacket over a simple white t-shirt, the uniform of the art student she was. Declan stood as they approached, his legs unsteady beneath him. "Declan," Tasha nodded in greeting, then turned to the young woman beside her. "Kayla, this is Declan Whitaker." Kayla regarded him steadily. "Hello," she said, her voice neither warm nor cold, the neutral greeting of a stranger. "Hello, Kayla," Declan replied, trying to keep his own voice steady. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." They sat, an awkward triangle of past decisions and present consequences. A server approached to take their orders, coffee for the adults, a chai latte for Kayla. "Mom says your father is sick," Kayla began without preamble once the server had left. That's why you wanted to find me after all this time. The directness caught Declan off guard, though he shouldn't have been surprised. If Tasha had told Kayla everything, as promised, there was no room for pretense between them. Yes, he admitted. My father has pancreatic cancer. He has a few months at most. He's asking to meet all his grandchildren before he dies. Including you. The grandfather who never acknowledged me, Kayla stated, not a question but a confirmation. Yes, Declan said again. He was wrong. We were all wrong. Kayla tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same analytical gaze Tasha had used in her art. Why should I meet him? Or you, for that matter? It was the question Declan had been asking himself since making the decision to find her. You shouldn't, he said honestly. Not for our sakes. Neither of us deserves your consideration. But perhaps for your own, to know where you come from, to understand the other half of your family history. Or to tell us exactly what you think of what we did. You're entitled to that, at the very least. Something flickered in Kayla's expression, surprise, perhaps, at his candor. Mom showed me the newspaper clippings, she said after a moment. About your wedding. It happened 2 months before I was born. Declan winced, remembering the society pages that had covered his wedding to Rebecca, the event of the season, everyone had called it. He hadn't spared a thought for Tasha, heavily pregnant and alone, reading those same articles. Yes, he acknowledged. I left your mother when she needed me most. I married someone else while she prepared to bring you into the world alone. There's no excuse for that. But you had your reasons, Kayla pressed. I want to hear them from you. Declan glanced at Tasha, who sat silently observing their exchange, her face carefully neutral. He took a deep breath, knowing he owed Kayla nothing less than complete honesty. I was ambitious, he began. Determined to make partner at my architecture firm by 30. When your mother told me she was pregnant, all I could see was how it would complicate my plans. And then I met Rebecca at a client event, from a prominent family, connected to all the right people. Being with her opened doors for my career that I thought would take years to unlock otherwise. He paused, the shameful truth bitter on his tongue. I convinced myself that your mother was trying to trap me. That the baby, that you, couldn't possibly be mine. It was easier than admitting I was walking away from my responsibilities out of ambition and cowardice. Kayla absorbed this, her expression thoughtful. And now? What's changed? Everything, Declan said simply. And nothing. I did become partner by 30. The firm now bears my name. I have the success I wanted. But my father is dying, my marriage is childless despite years of trying, and I've had to face the fact that I abandoned my own daughter for achievements that ultimately mean very little. So you're here because you regret your choices? Kayla asked. Yes, Declan admitted. But also because, regardless of how badly I've failed as a father, you are my daughter. I'd like the chance to know you, if you'll allow it. Kayla was quiet for a long moment, turning her chai latte between her hands, a gesture so like her mother's that it made Declan's chest ache. I don't need a father, she said finally. Mom has been everything I needed. We've been fine without you. I know, Declan nodded, feeling the justified rejection like a physical blow. But, Kayla continued, surprising him, I'm curious. About you. About your father. About that side of my family. I have questions that Mom can't answer. Hope flared in Declan's chest. I'll answer anything you want to know. You mentioned your marriage is childless, Kayla said, zeroing in on what had clearly caught her attention. So you and your wife never had children? No, Declan replied, the familiar pain surfacing. We've been trying since we married. Rebecca has had 3 miscarriages. We've tried every fertility treatment available. Nothing has worked. That must be hard, Kayla said, and like her mother before her, she showed a compassion that humbled him. It has been, Declan acknowledged. Especially knowing that I already had a child in the world that I'd turned my back on. Kayla nodded, processing this. I'll meet your father, she decided. And I'd like to know more about you, about your family history. For medical reasons, if nothing else. Thank you, Declan said, relief washing through him. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, Kayla said with a wisdom beyond her years. It's about what I choose to do. There's a difference. Declan nodded, recognizing the strength and clarity that could only have come from Tasha's influence. I understand. And I respect that completely. I have one more condition, Kayla added. I want to meet your wife too. Eventually. She's been part of this story from the beginning. I think I should know her as well. Declan glanced at Tasha, who looked surprised but didn't object. If that's what you want, I'm sure Rebecca would be willing to meet you, he said carefully. Good, Kayla nodded, decision made. We can arrange to see your father next weekend. Mom said he doesn't have much time. He doesn't, Declan confirmed. He'll be grateful for the chance to meet you. As the conversation continued, Declan gradually learned about the daughter he had missed knowing for 16 years. Kayla's passion for art, her plans to study at art school, her part-time job at a local gallery. She spoke with confidence about her goals, secure in who she was and what she wanted, a security that came from being raised by a mother who had put her needs first, always. When it was time to leave, Declan found himself reluctant to end this first tenuous connection. Thank you for meeting me, he said again, standing as Kayla and Tasha prepared to go. It means more than I can express. Kayla regarded him with those eyes so like his own. This is just a first step, she cautioned. I'm not promising anything beyond meeting your father. I understand, Declan assured her. Whatever you decide, whatever relationship you're comfortable with, or none at all, I'll respect your choice. As Tasha and Kayla walked away, Declan remained at the table, watching through the window as they crossed the street together, Tasha's arms slipping around her daughter's shoulders in a gesture of instinctive protection and pride. For the first time, Declan fully comprehended what his pride had cost him, 16 years of knowing this remarkable young woman. 16 years of watching her grow, of supporting her dreams, of simply being her father. It was a loss that could never be recovered, a debt that could never be repaid. But perhaps, if Kayla allowed it, there could still be a future where he was part of her life in some small way. Not as the father who had raised her, that honor belonged solely to Tasha, but as someone who recognized, belatedly but sincerely, the gift he had thrown away. Have you ever reconnected with someone after years apart? What did you learn about yourself in the process? Share your experience in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Mr. Hawthorne's Soul Stories for more powerful reflections on family, forgiveness, and finding your way back to what truly matters. Walter Whitaker's home stood on 2 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. The gracious Georgian mansion, with its symmetrical facade and stately columns, had been featured in architectural magazines and historical home tours. It was a far cry from the modest apartment where Kayla and Tasha lived, a physical manifestation of the different paths their lives had taken. This is where you grew up? Kayla asked as Declan pulled his car through the wrought iron gates the following weekend. No, Declan replied, glancing at Kayla in the rearview mirror. She and Tasha sat in the back seat, a united front. I grew up in a much smaller house across town. My father bought this place after his business took off, when I was in college. So you weren't always wealthy, Kayla observed. Not remotely, Declan confirmed. My father started with nothing. Built his engineering firm from scratch. We were solidly middle class when I was growing up. Kayla nodded, absorbing this information about her heritage. Mom says you had a scholarship to architecture school. I did, Declan agreed, surprised that Tasha had shared that detail. I wouldn't have been able to attend otherwise. Your grandfather paid for my books and living expenses, but tuition was beyond our means at the time. As they approached the house, Declan felt a strange tension in his chest. Bringing Tasha and Kayla here felt like worlds colliding, his past and present meeting in a way he'd never imagined. What would his father say to the granddaughter he'd never met? Would he acknowledge his own role in the family's fracture? A nurse opened the front door before they could ring the bell. "Mr. Whitaker is expecting you. He's in the sunroom. Please follow me." The house was quieter than Declan remembered, the energy of his vibrant father notably absent from the spacious rooms. Medical equipment stood in corners, a hospital bed visible through a doorway where a dining table had once been. The subtle scent of antiseptic mingled with the familiar smell of leather and old books. "Declan!" Caroline appeared from a side room, her face lighting up at the sight of her brother. Then her eyes moved past him to Tasha and Kayla. "Oh my goodness!" Caroline Whitaker Reynolds was 5 years younger than Declan, with the same dark hair and eyes that had been passed down to Kayla. She had always been the family peacemaker, the one who maintained relationships while others burned bridges. "Caroline, you remember Tasha," Declan said. "Of course." Caroline stepped forward to embrace Tasha warmly. "It's been far too long. Thank you for coming today. I know it can't be easy." She turned to Kayla, her eyes widening slightly at the family resemblance. "And you must be Kayla. I'm your Aunt Caroline. Though I don't expect you to call me that if it feels strange." Kayla smiled, responding to Caroline's genuine warmth. "It's nice to meet you." "Dad's having a good day," Caroline told Declan, leading them toward the sunroom at the back of the house. "The new medication is helping with the pain. But he tires easily, so." "We won't stay long," Tasha assured her. "We understand." The sunroom was flooded with late morning light, illuminating the figure in the armchair by the windows. Walter Whitaker had once been an imposing man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a commanding presence that filled any room he entered. The man waiting for them now was a diminished version of himself, his frame thinner, his movements careful and deliberate. But his eyes, the same dark eyes shared by Declan, Caroline, and now Kayla, were alert and piercing as ever. "Dad," Declan stepped forward. "I've brought some people I'd like you to meet." Walter's gaze moved past his son, settling first on Tasha. "Ms. Collins." "It's been a very long time." "Mr. Whitaker," Tasha nodded, her expression neutral. "I'm sorry about your illness." "Thank you." Walter's attention shifted to the young woman standing beside Tasha. For a moment, he seemed unable to speak, his eyes widening as he took in Kayla's appearance. "My God," he whispered finally. Kayla stepped forward, her poise remarkable for a 16-year-old meeting a dying stranger who happened to be her grandfather. "Hello, Mr. Whitaker. I'm Kayla Collins." Walter's eyes filled with tears, a sight so unexpected that Declan felt his own throat tighten. In 45 years, he had seen his father cry only twice, at his mother's funeral and when Caroline had nearly died from pneumonia as a child. "Kayla," Walter said, his voice hoarse. "Would you come closer, please? My eyes aren't what they used to be." Kayla glanced at her mother, who nodded slightly, then moved to stand before Walter's chair. "You look so much like my mother," Walter said wonderingly. "Declan's grandmother. She had the same eyes, the same way of holding herself." He gestured to a silver-framed photograph on a nearby table. "That's her there, on her wedding day." Kayla picked up the frame, studying the black and white image of a young woman with a serious expression but kind eyes. The resemblance was indeed striking. "No one in the family has looked so much like her until you," Walter continued. "It's rather remarkable." "Genetics are interesting that way," Kayla replied. "Sometimes traits skip generations." Walter smiled slightly. "Indeed they do." He glanced at Declan, then back to Kayla. "Would you sit with me for a moment? I have some things I'd like to say to you, if you're willing to listen." "All right," Kayla agreed, taking the seat across from Walter. Tasha moved to stand behind her daughter, a protective presence. Declan and Caroline remained a few steps back, giving them space while still within earshot. First, Walter began, his voice stronger than before. "I want to apologize to you for not acknowledging you as my granddaughter when you were born. For allowing my son to deny his responsibility to you and your mother. For missing 16 years of your life that I can never get back." Kayla regarded him thoughtfully. Mom says you knew about me, even back then. I did, Walter confirmed, not attempting to excuse himself. Declan told me that he had doubts about the paternity, but I knew. I knew in my heart he was lying to himself. The timing, the circumstances. And later, when I saw a photograph of you as a child. He shook his head. The resemblance to our family was unmistakable. Then why didn't you do something? Kayla asked, the question direct but not accusatory. Walter sighed deeply. Pride. Misplaced loyalty to my son. And frankly, cowardice. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that Declan needed to come to the realization himself. But the truth is, I was afraid of damaging my relationship with him, of losing my only son if I pushed too hard. He looked at Kayla squarely. It was selfish and wrong. And you paid the price for my silence. From where he stood, Declan felt each word like a physical blow. His father had known all along, had seen through his denials, and had chosen silence to keep the peace. I appreciate your honesty, Kayla said after a moment. Mom always taught me that acknowledging the truth is the first step toward anything worthwhile. Walter nodded, glancing at Tasha with newfound respect. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She's certainly raised a remarkable young woman in you. She is, Kayla agreed. The best mother anyone could ask for. The simple statement, delivered without malice but with absolute conviction, underscored the stark reality of what Declan had thrown away, the chance to be part of this extraordinary young woman's life from the beginning. I understand you're an artist, Walter said, changing the subject. Like your mother. I am, Kayla confirmed, her face brightening. I work mostly in mixed media, combining painting with found objects and photography. I'd love to see your work sometime, if you're willing to share it, Walter said, genuine interest in his voice. I have some photos on my phone, Kayla offered, surprising everyone with her openness. From my last exhibition at school. As Kayla showed Walter her artwork, explaining her techniques and inspirations, Declan watched the easy rapport developing between them with a mixture of gratitude and regret. His father, facing his own mortality, was making an effort that Declan himself had never bothered to make for 16 years. You should be proud, Caroline said quietly, coming to stand beside Declan. She's extraordinary. I had nothing to do with that, Declan replied, his voice low. That's all Tasha's doing. True, Caroline acknowledged. But she's still your daughter. And she's giving all of us a chance we don't deserve. After about 30 minutes, Walter's energy began to visibly wane. Tasha, noticing the change, gently suggested they should let him rest. Before you go, Walter said, reaching for a leather portfolio on the table beside him, I have something for you, Kayla. He removed a legal document and held it out to her. This is a trust fund I've established in your name. It would have been yours from birth, had things been different. It should be enough to cover your college education and give you a start in life afterward. Kayla glanced at her mother, uncertainty in her expression for the first time. You don't have to accept it, Tasha said carefully. It's entirely your choice. It comes with no strings attached, Walter assured them. No expectations or obligations. Consider it 16 years of birthday and Christmas gifts combined, if that helps. Or simply an old man's attempt to right a small part of a very large wrong. Kayla considered for a moment, then reached for the document. Thank you. I'll think about it. That's all I ask, Walter nodded, clearly tired but satisfied. And thank you for coming today. For giving an old fool the chance to meet his granddaughter before it's too late. As they said their goodbyes, Walter asked to speak to Declan alone for a moment. The others stepped out into the hallway, leaving father and son together. She's remarkable, Walter said without preamble. And the spitting image of you at that age, though I suspect she'd hate to hear that. She is remarkable, Declan agreed. No thanks to me. No, Walter agreed bluntly. No thanks to either of us. He fixed Declan with a penetrating stare. Don't make the same mistakes I did, son. I put success above everything, work above family, pride above honesty. And now, at the end, None of the achievements matter. Only the relationships remain, and those are the very things I neglected. I'm trying to make it right, Declan said quietly. No, Walter shook his head. You're making it better. It can never be right. You can't get back the years you missed. But you can be present for whatever years remain. If she'll have you. The drive back to Tasha and Kayla's apartment was mostly quiet, each person absorbed in their own thoughts about the meeting. As they pulled up outside the modest building, Kayla broke the silence. He seems sincere, she said. Your father. He is, Declan confirmed. Facing death has a way of clarifying what matters. And what about you? Kayla asked, meeting his eyes directly. What matters to you now? It was the question Declan had been asking himself since seeing her photograph. Getting to know you, he said honestly. If you'll allow it. Being whatever kind of father you're willing to accept, even if that's just an occasional presence in your life. Kayla considered this. I'd like to meet your wife next. Before we discuss anything more. Of course, Declan nodded. Whenever you're ready. Next weekend? Kayla suggested. Maybe for lunch? Declan glanced at Tasha, who nodded her agreement. Next weekend would be fine. I'll arrange it with Rebecca. As Kayla and Tasha exited the car, Declan rolled down the window. Thank you both. For today. It meant a great deal to my father. He's running out of time, Kayla said simply. No one should die with unnecessary regrets. With that profound observation, she and Tasha turned and walked into their building, leaving Declan to marvel once again at the wisdom and compassion of the daughter he had failed to know. Have you ever discovered an unexpected connection with a relative you barely knew? That moment when you recognize something of yourself in someone who shares your blood but not your history. Tell us about your experience in the comments below. Rebecca Whitaker stood at the window of her elegant dressing room, watching Declan pace the garden below. The past week had been a study in contrasts, the calm, composed facade she presented at work and social engagements versus the turmoil of her private thoughts. Her husband had a child. A 16-year-old daughter he had denied and abandoned before marrying Rebecca. A daughter who now wanted to meet her, the woman who had, however unwittingly, replaced her mother in Declan's life. What would she say to this girl? What could possibly bridge the chasm of 16 years of absence and 15 years of futile attempts to create the child that already existed in the world? Rebecca turned away from the window, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. At 46, she maintained a slim figure and polished appearance that had been her armor throughout her adult life. Perfect hair, subtle makeup, carefully selected clothes that projected success and control. But the eyes that looked back at her held questions she had avoided for too long. Was this carefully constructed life, the prestigious career, the social standing, the flawless home, worth the compromises she had made? The increasing emptiness she felt despite all her achievements? The doorbell chimed, announcing the arrival of their guests. Rebecca took a deep breath, smoothed her already smooth hair, and descended the stairs to meet the daughter her husband had denied. The introductions were awkward but civil. Tasha, whom Rebecca had never met but whose existence had always hovered at the edges of her marriage, was gracious but reserved. Kayla, whose resemblance to Declan was undeniable, was poised and observant, taking in the grand foyer with an artist's eye for detail. Thank you for coming, Rebecca said, leading them into the solarium where lunch had been arranged. Declan mentioned you're an artist, Kayla. I thought you might appreciate the light in this room. It's beautiful, Kayla acknowledged, glancing up at the glass ceiling. Perfect natural light for painting. That's what I thought when we renovated, Rebecca replied. Though I never found the time to pursue art myself. What do you do? Kayla asked as they seated themselves around the glass table. I run an investment firm that specializes in sustainable development, Rebecca explained. We fund environmentally conscious building projects, renewable energy initiatives, that sort of thing. That sounds worthwhile, Kayla said, surprising Rebecca with her genuine interest. Do you enjoy it? It was a simple question, but one Rebecca realized she hadn't asked herself in years. Did she enjoy her work, or had it simply become the scaffolding that supported her identity after motherhood proved elusive? Parts of it, she answered honestly. I like knowing our investments are creating positive change. The day-to-day management can be less fulfilling. Mom always says work should feed your soul as well as your bank account, Kayla observed. That's why she teaches as well as creates her own art. Rebecca glanced at Tasha, seeing her not as a rival but as a woman who had built a life on her own terms. That sounds like wise advice. Declan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, cleared his throat. Perhaps we should eat while everything's still warm. The meal progressed with careful conversation, neutral topics like Kayla's school, Rebecca's recent trip to Japan for a sustainable architecture conference, Walter's improving response to his new medication. The unspoken tensions remained below the surface, acknowledged but not confronted. Until dessert was served, and Kayla finally addressed what everyone had been avoiding. I'm curious, she said, looking directly at Rebecca. How do you feel about me? About finding out Declan had a daughter he never told you about? Declan nearly choked on his coffee. Kayla, that's rather direct. I prefer direct questions to polite fictions, Kayla replied unapologetically. And I think Rebecca deserves the chance to speak honestly, just as you and your father have. Rebecca set down her fork, meeting Kayla's forthright gaze. It's a fair question, she acknowledged. Initially, I was shocked. And angry, not at you, but at Declan for his deception. For allowing me to go through years of fertility treatments without ever mentioning he already had a child in the world. She paused, carefully considering her next words. But the anger has evolved into something more complex. Regret for the years wasted pursuing what now seems like hollow success. Sadness for what all of us have lost through Declan's choices. And curiosity about you, the young woman who shares my husband's blood but whom I never had the privilege to know. Would you have wanted to know me? Kayla asked. If Declan had acknowledged me from the beginning? It was the question Rebecca had been asking herself since learning of Kayla's existence. Would she have married Declan if she'd known about his pregnant ex-girlfriend? Would she have embraced being a stepmother to his child? Or would she have seen the situation as too complicated, too messy for the orderly life she had planned? I'd like to think so, she answered truthfully. But the woman I was then, she was very concerned with appearances, with doing things the right way. I'm not sure she would have had the courage to embrace a complicated family situation. She met Kayla's eyes directly. But the woman I am now, after 15 years of trying to have a child of my own, would have treasured the opportunity to know you, in whatever capacity you would have allowed. Kayla nodded, seeming to appreciate the honesty. Thank you for not treating me like a child who needs to be protected from difficult truths. Mom never talks down to me either. You're welcome, Rebecca replied, glancing at Tasha with newfound respect. And thank you for being willing to meet me. I know this situation isn't of your making, and you had every right to refuse. I was curious, Kayla admitted. About the woman my father chose instead of my mother and me. I wanted to understand. The candor was breathtaking, delivered without malice but with a directness that cut through pretense. Rebecca felt something shift inside her, an admiration for this young woman's clarity, her unwillingness to shrink herself to make others comfortable. And do you? Rebecca asked. Understand, I mean? I'm beginning to, Kayla replied. Though I still have questions for Declan. About choices and consequences. About what he wants now. As do I, Rebecca said quietly. The rest of the lunch passed in a strange blend of tension and connection. By the time Tasha and Kayla departed, promising to stay in touch regarding Walter's condition, Rebecca felt emotionally drained but oddly cleansed, as if a festering wound had finally been lanced. Later, as she and Declan cleared the dishes together, dismissing the housekeeper who normally handled such tasks, Rebecca broke the contemplative silence. She's extraordinary, she observed. Perceptive, honest, compassionate despite everything. Yes, Declan agreed. Somehow she's emerged unscathed from my terrible choices. That's Tasha's doing. Not entirely unscathed, Rebecca corrected him. No child grows up without a father and remains completely unaffected. But she's clearly loved and secure in who she is. She placed the last plate in the dishwasher and turned to face her husband. Which raises the question, where do we go from here, Declan? It was the conversation they had been postponing since his revelation. The reckoning that could no longer be avoided. What do you want, Rebecca? Declan asked, echoing the question she had posed to him on the terrace nights before. Rebecca considered carefully before answering. I want honesty. I want to stop living a life built on appearances and expectations. I want. She hesitated, then continued with newfound clarity. I want a chance to reassess what matters to me, what I truly value, without the pressure to maintain the perfect facade we've created. Are you saying you want a separation? Declan asked, his expression unreadable. I'm saying I need space to figure out who I am without the identity we've constructed together, Rebecca replied. 15 years of marriage, most of it centered around trying to have a child, has left me unsure of my own desires separate from that shared goal. Declan nodded slowly. I understand. I've been doing my own reassessing since seeing Kayla's photograph. Questioning every choice that led me away from her and Tasha. Do you regret marrying me? Rebecca asked, the question she had feared most since learning of Kayla's existence. Declan was quiet for a long moment. No, he said finally. But I regret my reasons for doing so. I regret choosing status and career advancement over integrity and responsibility. I regret that our marriage began with a deception that has shadowed everything since. It was painful but honest, the most honest conversation they had shared in years. I think I should stay at the apartment downtown for a while, Rebecca said, referring to the Pide terrace she maintained near her office. Give us both some space to process everything that's happening. If that's what you need, Declan agreed. But Rebecca, I want you to know that despite everything, I do care for you deeply. The life we've built together hasn't been a lie, even if it began with one. Rebecca smiled sadly. I know. And I care for you too. But caring isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes we need truth more than comfort, authenticity more than achievement. As Rebecca packed a suitcase that evening, she felt a strange lightness despite the upheaval. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she was making a choice based solely on her own needs and values, not on appearances or expectations. Whatever came next, reconciliation or permanent separation, would emerge from truth rather than pretense. And that, she realized, was a foundation worth building upon. How often do we confuse external success with genuine fulfillment? Has there been a moment when you realized the life you carefully built wasn't actually the one you needed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The next 3 weeks brought a delicate dance of new connections and painful reckonings. Declan visited Walter daily, witnessing his father's physical decline even as they engaged in deeper conversations than they had shared in decades. Caroline coordinated with Tasha to bring Kayla for 2 more visits, each one strengthening the tentative bond between grandfather and granddaughter. Rebecca remained at her downtown apartment, immersing herself in work while seeking therapy to process her feelings about Declan's deception and her own unfulfilled desire for motherhood. They spoke occasionally, brief, careful conversations about practical matters, giving each other the space to reflect on what they truly wanted from their future, together or apart. Declan reached out to Kayla with equal caution, respecting her boundaries while making himself available. A text message about an architecture exhibition she might find interesting. A brief call to share information about the family medical history, prompted by Walter's illness. Small steps toward connection without expectation or pressure. Then came the call from Caroline in the middle of the night. Dad's taken a turn for the worse, she said, her voice tight with contained emotion. The doctors are saying it's a matter of days now, maybe hours. You need to come, Declan. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Declan promised, already reaching for clothes. Have you called Rebecca? Yes. She's on her way too. Caroline hesitated. And I called Tasha. I hope that's okay. Dad's been asking for Kayla. Declan felt a surge of gratitude for his sister's thoughtfulness. Of course it's okay. Thank you, Caroline. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment and Walter's labored breathing. Caroline sat at one side of the bed, holding her father's hand. Declan took the chair on the opposite side, shocked by the change in Walter's appearance in the 2 days since he'd last visited. His father seemed to have aged years and hours, his skin ashen, his once commanding presence diminished to near transparency. Rebecca arrived shortly after, her composed exterior betrayed only by the slight tremor in her hands as she greeted Caroline with a hug and took a seat near the door. The four of them maintained a vigil as the night deepened, sharing occasional memories of happier times, falling silent when the weight of the present moment pressed too heavily. Near dawn, the door opened again. Tasha entered first, followed by Kayla, both looking solemn but resolute despite the early hour and rushed circumstances. "Thank you for coming," Caroline said, rising to embrace them both. "Of course," Tasha replied softly. "No one should be alone at the end." Walter stirred at the sound of voices, his eyes opening with effort. "Kayla," he called, his voice barely audible. "I'm here, grandfather." Kayla moved to the bedside, taking Walter's frail hand in hers without hesitation. "We came as soon as we heard." A slight smile curved Walter's lips. "You called me grandfather." "It seemed like the right time," Kayla said simply. Walter's gaze moved around the room, taking in the gathered faces, his children, his granddaughter, the women who had loved them. "My family," he murmured. "All here." "All here," Caroline confirmed, tears in her voice. "Good." Walter's eyes drifted closed, then opened again with visible effort. "I need to say something, while I still can." Everyone leaned closer, intent on catching his fading words. "I wasted too much time," Walter said, each phrase separated by labored breathing. "On pride. On work. On appearances. Don't make my mistakes." His gaze found Declan. "Tell the truth. Always. Even when it's hard." His eyes shifted to Rebecca. "Find your own path. Not what others expect." To Caroline, "Keep being the heart of this family. They need you." And finally to Kayla, "Forgive him. If you can. Not for his sake, but for yours." Kayla nodded, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I'll try." "That's all any of us can do," Walter whispered. "Try. And love each other, despite the failures." They were his last coherent words. Walter Whitaker slipped into unconsciousness shortly after and passed away peacefully as morning light began to filter through the hospital window. The family he had gathered in his final hours remained at his bedside, united in grief despite the complicated relationships that bound them together. Later, in the hospital cafeteria where they had retreated to allow the staff to attend to necessary arrangements, Declan found himself seated across from Tasha for the first time since their initial tense cafe meeting. The others were scattered around the room, Caroline speaking with the funeral director on the phone, Rebecca getting coffee, Kayla talking quietly with a hospital chaplain who had offered condolences. "He loved you, you know," Tasha said suddenly, breaking the silence between them. "Your father. Even when he was wrong, even when he enabled your worst choices, it came from love." Declan looked up, surprised by the insight. "How did you know that?" "I recognize it," Tasha replied. "That fierce, flawed love that wants to protect those we care about, even from the consequences of their own actions. I've had to fight that instinct with Kayla, the desire to shield her from every hurt, every disappointment. But real love means letting people face the truth, even when it's painful." "You've always been wiser than me," Declan acknowledged. "Even back in college." "Not wiser," Tasha shook her head. "Just different priorities. You valued achievement and recognition. I valued authenticity and connection. Neither approach is inherently wrong, it's what we do with those values that matters. And I made terrible choices based on mine," Declan said quietly. "Yes," Tasha agreed, not unkind but unwilling to soften the truth. "But you're making better ones now. Coming forward about Kayla. Being honest with Rebecca. supporting your father at the end without pretense or expectation. Too little, too late? Declan asked, echoing the phrase Kayla had used at their first meeting. For some things, yes, Tasha admitted. You can't recover the years you missed with Kayla. You can't undo the pain you caused. But for other things, it's never too late to choose a better path forward. Before Declan could respond, Kayla approached their table, her expression solemn but composed. The chaplain says there's a small chapel downstairs if anyone wants some quiet time, she reported. And Aunt Caroline is finishing up arrangements with the funeral home. Declan's heart caught at hearing Kayla refer to Caroline as aunt, a small but significant acknowledgement of their family connection. Thank you, sweetheart, Tasha said, making room for Kayla to join them. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Kayla replied. Sad, but I'm glad I got to know him a little before he died. To understand that part of where I come from. He was very glad to know you too, Declan said. You brought him great joy in his final weeks. Kayla nodded, accepting this. What happens now? With all of us, I mean. It was the question they had all been avoiding. What shape would their connections take now that Walter, the catalyst for their reunion, was gone? That depends on what everyone wants, Tasha said carefully. There's no prescribed path for situations like ours. Kayla turned to Declan. What do you want? Now that your father is gone, are you still interested in being part of my life? The directness of the question was pure Kayla, but Declan heard the vulnerability beneath it. The fear that his interest had been solely to please his dying father, not a genuine desire to know his daughter. Yes, Declan said firmly. If you'll allow it, I'd very much like to be part of your life, Kayla. Not as a replacement for the mother who raised you single-handedly, not with expectations of being called dad or instantly forming a close bond. But as someone who wants to know you, support your dreams, and perhaps, someday, earn a small place in your heart. Kayla studied him intently, as if searching for deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. I'd be willing to try. Slowly. Maybe we could meet for lunch sometimes. Or you could come to my next art show at school. I'd like that very much, Declan said, emotion thickening his voice. Whatever pace works for you, whatever boundaries you need. I'm here. And Rebecca? Kayla asked, glancing toward the woman who stood by the coffee station, her elegant posture at odds with the fluorescent lighting and utilitarian surroundings. That's complicated, Declan admitted. We're taking some time apart to figure out what we both want for our futures. Because of me? Kayla asked, her directness again cutting through pretense. No, Declan assured her. Because of choices I made long before today. Rebecca deserves a chance to decide if she wants to build a life with someone who hid such a significant truth from her. And I need to figure out who I am when I'm not hiding from my past. Kayla accepted this explanation with a thoughtful nod. I like her, she said. She's honest. And strong. Yes, she is, Declan agreed, glancing toward his wife with a complex mixture of regret and admiration. Much like your mother. The funeral was held 3 days later, a dignified affair that reflected Walter's standing in the community while honoring his wish for simplicity. Declan was surprised but deeply touched when Kayla asked if she could attend with Tasha. More surprising still was Rebecca's quiet presence beside him during the service, a gesture of support that transcended their current uncertainty. As mourners filed past to offer condolences, Declan found himself standing with Caroline, Rebecca, Tasha, and Kayla, a unlikely family portrait united by grief and tentative new connections. Several of Walter's business associates did double takes upon seeing Kayla, her resemblance to the Whitaker family unmistakable. Walter's granddaughter, Caroline, explained smoothly to each surprised face, offering no further explanation. Her matter-of-fact acknowledgement, free from shame or secrecy, felt like the first step toward healing the family's fractured history. After the service, as attendees gathered at Walter's home for the reception, Declan found Rebecca alone in the study, looking at family photographs arranged on the bookshelves. Thank you for being here today, he said quietly. It means a great deal. Rebecca turned, her expression thoughtful. Walter was my father-in-law for 15 years. Whatever is happening between us now doesn't erase that relationship. Declan nodded, understanding. Have you given any thought to what you want to do? About us? Rebecca was silent for a moment, considering. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past weeks. About what I truly want, what would make me happy rather than what would look right or meet expectations. And what have you concluded? Declan asked, trying to prepare himself for whatever answer might come. That I married you for some of the same reasons you married me, Rebecca said candidly. For what you represented, success, stability, social position. For how our union would advance my own ambitions. That doesn't mean I didn't care for you, or that our marriage was entirely transactional. But it wasn't built on the foundation it should have been. Declan absorbed this, recognizing the truth in her assessment. So where does that leave us? I think, Rebecca said carefully, that we need to decide if we want to build something new together, something honest, something based on who we truly are rather than who we've pretended to be. Or if we need to accept that our marriage has served its purpose and release each other to find more authentic paths. It was the most honest conversation they had shared in their 15 years together, stripped of pretense and social niceties. What do you want? Declan asked, genuinely unsure. Rebecca smiled sadly. I'm not entirely sure yet. But I do know that I don't want to make this decision while we're both grieving. Emotions run high after a death. We should give ourselves time to process everything before making permanent choices. That seems wise, Declan agreed. More time apart? For now, Rebecca confirmed. Though perhaps with more communication than we've had these past weeks. I'd like to know how things are developing with Kayla. And I'd like you to know about some changes I'm considering for my own life. Changes? Declan inquired. I'm thinking about scaling back at the firm, Rebecca explained. Taking a less demanding role that would allow me to pursue some interests I've neglected. Art appreciation classes, perhaps. Travel that isn't tied to business. Maybe even some volunteer work with children. Declan nodded, seeing a new light in Rebecca's eyes as she described these possibilities. That sounds like a positive direction. It feels right, she agreed. For the first time in a long time, I'm making choices based on what I want, not what others expect of me. She glanced toward the door, where the murmur of guests could be heard from the reception. We should probably rejoin everyone. As they moved to leave the study, Rebecca paused. Declan? Yes? Whatever happens with us. I'm glad Kayla is in your life now. She's remarkable. And seeing you with her, the way you respect her boundaries, the way you're trying to build a relationship on her terms, it shows me a side of you I'm not sure I've ever fully seen before. With that, she slipped out of the room, leaving Declan to consider how his greatest failure had somehow created the opportunity for his most meaningful growth. In the weeks following the funeral, a new rhythm began to emerge. Declan and Kayla established a tentative tradition of Sunday afternoon meetings, sometimes for lunch, sometimes at an art exhibition or architectural landmark that interested them both. Tasha occasionally joined them but more often gave them space to develop their own connection, secure in her position as Kayla's primary parent. Rebecca remained at her downtown apartment but began joining Declan for dinner once a week, each of them sharing developments in their separate journeys of self-discovery. The conversations were sometimes awkward, sometimes surprisingly intimate, as they got to know each other in ways they never had during 15 years of marriage. I've scheduled a consultation with an adoption agency, Rebecca mentioned during one such dinner, 2 months after Walter's death. Not with any immediate plans, but to understand the options for a single woman my age. Declan looked up from his meal, surprised. Single woman? Rebecca met his gaze steadily. I think we both know where this is heading, Declan. We've been living separately for months now. We're both changing, growing in different directions. And while I care for you deeply, I don't think either of us wants to return to the marriage we had before. Declan was quiet for a moment, absorbing the truth of her words. You're right, he acknowledged finally. Though I'm sad to admit it. We did build something meaningful together, Rebecca, despite its flawed foundation. We did, she agreed. And I'll always value those years. But I think we both deserve the chance to build something more authentic now, you with Kayla and whatever else your future holds, me with whatever path I choose. So this is it? Declan asked. The end of our marriage? The end of our marriage, Rebecca confirmed gently. But not, I hope, of our connection. We've been through too much together to become strangers. They discussed practical matters, the house, financial arrangements, how to share the news with friends and colleagues. But beneath the logistics lay a surprising sense of peace, of rightness. They had built a life together based on mutual ambition and social expectations. Now they would build separate lives based on truth and authentic desires. As summer turned to fall, Declan found himself navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. Divorced after 15 years of marriage, living alone in a downtown apartment similar to the one Rebecca had occupied during their separation, she had kept the house, preferring its gardens and space. Building a cautious relationship with the daughter he had abandoned. Learning who he was when stripped of the identities he had hidden behind for so long. It was during this period that he received an unexpected invitation from Tasha. Kayla's school is hosting a major art exhibition, she explained over the phone. She has 3 pieces featured, the most of any student. She'd like you to attend the opening. Of course, Declan agreed immediately. I'd be honored. There's more, Tasha continued. She'd like to introduce you as her father. To her teachers and friends. If you're comfortable with that. Declan felt his throat tighten with emotion. Are you sure? Is she sure? She is, Tasha confirmed. She's thought about it carefully. We've talked it through. She says that while she'll always consider me her primary parent, she's ready to acknowledge you publicly as her father. Thank you, Declan managed, overcome by the significance of this step. Both of you. The exhibition opening was held at a respected local gallery that partnered with the school's advanced art program. Declan arrived early, nervously straightening his tie as he entered the already crowded space. He spotted Kayla immediately, surrounded by classmates and teachers, her face animated as she described her work to an attentive audience. She looked up, saw him, and smiled, not the guarded, careful smile of their early meetings, but something warmer, more genuine. She excused herself from the group and made her way to him. You came, she said, sounding pleased but not surprised. I wouldn't have missed it, Declan assured her. Congratulations, Kayla. This is quite an honor. Thanks, she replied, a becoming flush of pride coloring her cheeks. Do you want to see my pieces? They're in the main gallery. Lead the way, Declan said, following as she guided him through the crowd. Kayla's work was displayed prominently, 3 large mixed-media pieces that combined painting, photography, and found objects in a thought-provoking exploration of identity and heritage. Declan was struck by the technical skill, certainly, but more by the emotional depth of the work, the way it communicated complex feelings without words. These are extraordinary, he said truthfully. You're incredibly talented, Kayla. Mom says I get my eye for composition from you, Kayla replied, watching his reaction. That you always had a natural sense of balance and proportion in your architectural drawings. The casual acknowledgement of their shared traits, something Kayla had previously avoided, felt like a gift. That's generous of her to say. Though I think your artistic talent far exceeds my technical drawing skills. Before Kayla could respond, a teacher approached them. Kayla, the director wants to speak with you about your work. Oh, excuse me, she added, noticing Declan. I didn't mean to interrupt. No problem, Mrs. Hayes, Kayla assured her. Then, with a deep breath and straightened shoulders, she added, this is my father, Declan Whitaker. The simple declaration, spoken without qualification or explanation, filled Declan with a complex mixture of pride, gratitude, and lingering regret for all the similar moments he had missed. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Hayes said, recovering quickly from her evident surprise. Your daughter is one of our most promising students. Her work shows remarkable maturity and insight. I'm just beginning to discover that myself, Declan replied honestly. but I couldn't be more proud. Throughout the evening, Kayla continued to introduce Declan as my father to teachers, friends, and gallery patrons. Each time, he felt the weight of the title, both the honor it represented and the responsibility it carried. This wasn't a role he had earned through years of guidance and support. It was a gift Kayla had chosen to give him, despite his past failures. Near the end of the event, as the crowd began to thin, Declan spotted Tasha across the room, deep in conversation with a gallery owner. She caught his eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement if not quite approval. "She's been amazing through all of this," Kayla said, following his gaze. "Never trying to influence me one way or the other about you. Just supporting whatever I decided." "Your mother is an extraordinary woman," Declan agreed. "I didn't appreciate that enough when we were younger." "She says the same about you," Kayla replied. "That you had qualities she didn't fully value at the time. That you were driven and focused in a way she only understood years later." The insight surprised him. "She said that?" Kayla nodded. "Mom's not bitter, you know. She built a good life for us. She says what happened between you shaped her into the person she needed to be for me." It was a generous perspective that Declan wasn't sure he deserved, but one he was grateful for nonetheless. "I'm glad. Though I still regret the pain I caused her. And you." "I know," Kayla said simply. Then, with characteristic directness, she added, "I'm not ready to forgive you completely. Maybe I never will be, for some parts of what happened. But I think I'd like to try having you in my life now. As my father. With all the complications that entails." It was more than Declan had dared to hope for when he first reached out months ago. "I would be honored," he said, emotion making his voice rough. "And Kayla, I promise I will do everything in my power to be worthy of that title from now on. That's all any of us can do, isn't it?" Kayla said, echoing Walter's final words. "Try our best, despite our failures." Across the room, Tasha finished her conversation and approached them. "Congratulations, sweetheart," she said to Kayla. "Everyone's talking about your work. The gallery owner is interested in including you in a young artist showcase next spring." "Really?" Kayla's face lit up. "That would be amazing." "You've earned it," Tasha assured her. Then, turning to Declan, she added, "What did you think of her pieces?" "They're extraordinary," Declan replied honestly. "The technical skill is impressive, but it's the emotional depth that really stands out. She's saying something meaningful through her art, not just creating something pretty to look at." Tasha smiled, pleased by his understanding. "Exactly. That's what I've always tried to teach her, that art is communication, not just decoration." The three of them stood together, an unlikely family unit formed through pain and forgiveness, absence and reconnection. Not perfect, not conventional, but authentic in a way Declan's previous life had never been. Later that evening, as Declan drove home to his apartment, he reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. From the desperate man who had reached out to Tasha seeking access to their daughter for his dying father's sake, to the person he was becoming now, humbled, more authentic, learning to value connection over achievement. There were still challenges ahead. Building a meaningful relationship with Kayla would take time and consistent effort. Navigating co-parenting with Tasha would require ongoing communication and respect. Finalizing his divorce from Rebecca while maintaining the friendship that had begun to emerge from their shared history. But for the first time and longer than he could remember, Declan felt truly present in his own life. Not hiding from past mistakes, not pursuing external markers of success, but engaged in the messy, imperfect process of genuine connection. As he parked outside his building, his phone chimed with a text message. From Kayla, "Thanks for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have you there. Lunch on Sunday?" Declan smiled as he typed his reply, "Wouldn't have missed it for the world. Sunday lunch sounds perfect. I'm so proud of you, Kayla." It was a small exchange, a tiny step in their emerging relationship. But to Declan, it represented everything he had nearly lost through pride and ambition, and everything he now had the chance to build through honesty and humility. The past couldn't be changed. The 16 years of absence couldn't be recovered. But the present was full of possibility, and the future remained unwritten. Not the future he had once planned, with its emphasis on prestige and achievement, but something potentially more meaningful, a life of authentic connections, hard-earned wisdom, and the privilege of knowing the extraordinary young woman his daughter had become without him. Is there ever a too late when it comes to acknowledging our mistakes and trying to make amends? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in this story about family, forgiveness, and finding your authentic path, please subscribe to Mr. Hawthorne's Soul Stories for more reflections on life's most meaningful journeys. 1 year after Walter Whitaker's death, a small gathering took place at Tasha Collins's home. Not a formal memorial, but a quiet acknowledgement of how much had changed in 12 months. Declan and Kayla sat at the kitchen table, heads bent over architectural sketches, Kayla's design for a combined art studio and community classroom space she hoped to create after college, Declan offering technical guidance while respecting her creative vision. In the living room, Rebecca and Tasha discussed an upcoming charity auction that would feature some of Tasha's work, their initial wariness having evolved into a genuine if unlikely friendship. Rebecca, now settled into her new role as a part-time consultant, had discovered a passion for arts education philanthropy that aligned with Tasha's work in underserved communities. Caroline arrived last, bringing dessert and updates about her children, who had formed their own connections with their newly discovered cousin Kayla. The blended family they had created wasn't conventional, wasn't what any of them had imagined, but it was authentic, built on truth rather than appearances, on chosen connections rather than obligatory ones. As they gathered around Tasha's dining table, Declan looked at the faces surrounding him, his daughter, now 17 and increasingly confident in her identity, his former wife, finding fulfillment in a life she had chosen rather than inherited, his sister, the steady heart of their reconfigured family, and Tasha, the woman whose strength and integrity had created the space for all of this healing to occur. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, raising his glass. To Walter, whose final act of courage in facing the truth made all of this possible. And to all of you, who had the grace to give second chances where they weren't deserved but were deeply needed. And to choices, Kayla added, raising her own glass. The ones that shape our lives, for better or worse. And the ones that give us the chance to begin again. It wasn't a perfect ending, life rarely offers those. Declan would always carry the regret of missing Kayla's childhood. Rebecca would always wonder what might have been if truth had come earlier. Kayla would always have the experience of growing up without her father. But it was a beginning of sorts. A hard-won understanding that while we cannot undo our past choices, we can make new ones based on truth and authenticity. That family can be reconfigured, relationships rebuilt, even after profound betrayal and absence. And perhaps most importantly, a recognition that it's never too late to choose a different path, to step away from pride and pretense towards something more meaningful, more genuine, more aligned with our deepest values. As the evening drew to a close, Kayla walked Declan to his car. In the years since they had begun building their relationship, these moments alone had become precious, spaces where they could speak honestly, without audience or pretense. "I have something to tell you," Kayla said, her expression both nervous and excited. "I got early acceptance to the Rhode Island School of Design. Full scholarship." "Kayla, that's wonderful!" Declan exclaimed, genuinely thrilled. "Congratulations. It's one of the best art schools in the country." "I know," she agreed, unable to contain her smile. "I can hardly believe it." "I can," Declan said seriously. "You've worked incredibly hard, and your talent is undeniable. They're lucky to have you." Kayla ducked her head slightly, still unused to his praise despite the months of growing connection. Mom's already planning how often she can visit. "It's only a few hours' drive." "She'll miss you terribly," Declan acknowledged. "As will I." "Well," Kayla said, meeting his eyes directly, "that's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. Mom mentioned that you're working on a project in Providence. The new arts center." "I am," Declan confirmed, surprised she knew about it. "It's in the early stages." "I was thinking," Kayla continued, her tone casual though her eyes were watchful, "that maybe we could meet sometimes while I'm at school and you're there for work. If you want to, I mean." The deliberate casualness couldn't disguise the significance of the offer. Kayla was creating space for their relationship to continue and grow, even as she moved toward her independent future. She was choosing to include him in her life in a new way. "I would like that very much," Declan said, emotion making his voice rough. "And Kayla, I want you to know how proud I am of you. Not just for your achievements, impressive as they are, but for who you are. Your integrity, your compassion, your courage in facing difficult truths. Those qualities are worth more than any success or recognition." Kayla regarded him thoughtfully. "Mom says those are the qualities we should judge ourselves by. Not money or fame or social position, but how we treat others, especially when it's difficult." "Your mother is a wise woman," Declan agreed. "It took me far too long to learn what she understood instinctively." "Better late than never," Kayla said with a small smile. Then, in a gesture that still felt new and precious, she stepped forward and gave him a quick hug. "Good night, Dad." The word, spoken without qualification or hesitation for the first time, landed like a gift in Declan's heart. Not a title he had earned through years of guidance and support, but one he was still striving to deserve through present actions and future commitment. "Good night, Kayla," he replied, watching as she turned and walked back toward the house, toward the mother who had never failed her, who had created the secure foundation that allowed Kayla to risk this tentative connection with the father who had once walked away. As Declan drove home, he reflected on the strange, winding path that had led him to this moment. The ambitious young architect who had abandoned his pregnant girlfriend for social advancement would not recognize the man he had become, divorced, living modestly, finding meaning not in professional accolades but in the slow, careful building of a relationship with his once denied daughter. It wasn't the life he had planned. It wasn't the success he had envisioned when making those fateful choices 16 years ago. But it was authentic in a way his previous existence had never been, grounded in truth rather than appearance, in genuine connection rather than social expectation. And perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that our worst mistakes, our most shameful choices, need not define us permanently if we are willing to face them honestly. That redemption doesn't mean erasing the past, but building something new and genuine from its painful lessons. That it's never too late to choose integrity over ambition, truth over comfort, authentic connection over social advantage. Not a perfect ending, but a more meaningful beginning. Our lives are shaped by our choices, both the ones we're proud of and the ones we regret. But perhaps what matters most is not avoiding mistakes entirely, but how we respond when we recognize them, whether we continue down familiar paths out of pride or comfort, or find the courage to change direction, to seek forgiveness, to build something new from the lessons of our failures. What choice are you facing today? And what values will guide your decision? Remember, it's never too late to choose a different path. Thank you for joining us for another Mr. Hawthorne Soul Story. If you found value in this reflection on family, forgiveness, and finding your authentic path, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear its message. Until next time, this is Mr. Hawthorne, reminding you that our most meaningful legacy isn't what we achieve, but how we love.